Federal Officer for the Nancy, and I would like to thank you for your attendance and support this morning. Today, the Nancy will receive updates from the Secure Telephone Identity Governance Authority, the North American Portability Management, LLC, and the Numbering Administration Oversight Working Group. It will also discuss and vote on recommendations from the Call Authentication Trust Anchor Working Group before hearing a presentation from the FCC on the second reporting order for promoting caller ID authentication to combat illegal robocalls. With that summary of the agenda, I will turn the meeting over to Jennifer McKee, the Nancy Chair. Jennifer?
Thank you, Marilyn. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this meeting of the North American Numbering Council. We welcome members of the public watching via live stream. Encourage anyone who has any questions to submit them to livequestions@fcc.gov. Your questions will be read during the public participation portion of the meeting. Before we begin, I want to once again review for all of us the best practices for how we run our virtual meetings. First of all, please keep your phone on mute when not speaking. If you need to take another call or leave the meeting momentarily, please do not put the call on hold, as some systems may play hold music that will interfere with the meeting. Instead, either leave your line on mute or temporarily jump off the call and then rejoin it when you can. Those of us who are participating on WebEx should disable the video function, and you'll see a button on your screen with a camera on it. Please make sure that function is off. This will help the meeting run more smoothly. If you have a question or comment during designated discussion times, there are 3 ways for letting us know. First of all, you can raise your hand electronically using the raise hand function on WebEx. There are circular icons along the bottom of your screen. Select participants, which will pop up a list of all those in the meeting. The raise hand icon should appear when you mouse over your name. You may be listed as you. Click on it and it will let us know that you want to speak. Marilyn will track who raises a hand, and at the end of an agenda segment, we will address your question. Once we call on you, you can unmute your phone to ask your question. When you're finished, please unclick the icon to turn off the raise hand function so that we know you no longer have a question or comment. The meeting host cannot control the raise hand function, so we each have to click our own icon once our questions have been addressed. We'll do our best to monitor the function. Now, if you're having difficulty with that raise hand function, you can also ask a question by using the WebEx chat feature. You can send a message to Marilyn as the host, and they will not be made public, but Marilyn will read it aloud to the group. And lastly, as a final measure, or if you want to respond to a question that has been asked, you can simply unmute your phone. If you go with this option, please remember to identify yourself when you speak. We may not recognize your voice. Please also remember to put your phone back on mute when you are done speaking. As we move through the agenda and any questions arise, Marilyn or I will verbally pass the mic to those of you who are presenting. Again, we are trying to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to be heard in an orderly fashion. We'll be voting on a recommendation during this meeting. Please remember to unmute your phones when I call for motions and for votes, and then put yourself back on mute. Does anyone have any questions on technical aspects of the meeting before we begin? Okay, hearing no questions. Reminder to our members of the public who have questions for the Nancy. First of all, there was an opportunity to submit questions via the FCC's electronic comment filing system. Members of the public watching now during the live stream can also ask a question by sending it via email to livequestions@fcc.gov. Submitted questions will be read live during the public participation portion of the meeting. Now, before we begin, I'll ask if any members need to make any disclosures. Okay, hearing none, we'll proceed. First, I want to ask my Vice Chair, Bruce Williamson, if he has any comments, remarks he would like to make at the beginning.
No, I do not, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Then I'll turn the meeting back over to our designated federal official, Marilyn Jones, who will conduct the roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Let's start with the voting members. 800 Response Information Services.
Hi, yes, this is Heather Barrows.
Thank you, Heather. ACA Connect. Brian or Michael, are you here? Ad hoc Telecommunications Users Committee.
Susan Gately here for Ad Hoc. Hi,
Thank you,
Marilyn.
Susan. Good morning. Addie.
Good morning, Jackie Waldema.
Thank you, Jackie. AT&T.
Good morning. This is Ola Oyufusi.
Thank you. Bandwidth.
Good morning, Lisa Jill Freeman is here.
Thank you, Lisa.
Greg will probably join us later.
Okay, thanks. Charter Communications.
Hi, Marilyn. Glenn Klepper is on.
Thank you, Glenn. Comcast.
Good morning, Marilyn. Tim Cagle is on.
Morning, Tim. CCA.
Good morning, Marilyn. It's Alexi Maltas for CCA.
Good morning, Alexi. CTIA.
Hi, it's Matt Hurst.
Morning, Matt. Google. Encompass.
Yes, Chris Shipley is here. Good morning.
Morning, Chris. Entrado.
Good morning, Marilyn. Bob McCausland is here.
Morning, Bob. Nehru.
Good morning. It's Karen Charles Peterson.
Good morning, Commissioner. Masuka.
Good morning, Marilyn. It's Barry Hobbins for Nasuka.
Good morning, Barry.
Good morning.
NTCA. Nevada PUC. Peerless Network. SIP Forum.
Rich Shockey's here, Marilyn.
Good morning, Rich. T-Mobile.
Good morning,
Scott
everyone.
Furman.
This is Rosemary Lice with T-Mobile. Hey, Scott.
Yeah,
Good
Scott
morning,
Furman.
Rosemary and Scott. Thank you. TDS.
Good morning. Paul Najedlo is here.
Morning, Paul. Telnet.
Good morning, Marilyn. David here.
Morning, David. Julio.
Good morning, Melissa Blassingame is here.
Morning, Melissa. US Connect.
Good morning, Marilyn. Bridget Alexander White's on and on.
Good morning, Bridget. US Telecom.
Hi, Marilyn. Christine Hackman is on.
Good morning, Christine. Verizon.
Dana Crandall here.
Good morning, Dana.
Morning.
Vonage.
Alan Vasquez representing Vonage.
Good morning, Alan. For our non-voting members, iConnective.
Good morning. Chris Drake is here.
Good morning,
And
Chris.
Glenn Reynolds is here.
And Glenn. Somos.
Good morning, it's Ann Berkowitz.
Good morning, Ann. Did I miss anyone? Okay, that concludes our roll call. Nancy Chair, I would turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. I'm now pleased to welcome Daniel Kahn, the Associate Chief of the Wireline Competition Bureau, who will make some opening remarks this morning. Dan, the call is yours.
Good morning, Chair McKee, Vice Chair Williamson, members of the NANCI, and members of the public watching online. Thank you so much for joining us today for our fourth virtual meeting of the Council. While we all continue to hope to gather in person soon, your commitment to this online process ensures that your vital work can continue in a thoughtful and safe manner. As always, we appreciate your service and accommodation in this uncertain environment. Unsurprisingly, it was an incredibly busy and productive summer for the NANCI. In July, you approved recommendations from 3 of the working groups on matters concerning nationwide number portability, interoperable video calling, and toll-free number assignment. Additionally, you approved recommendations for the North American Numbering Plan fund size projections and contribution factor, and the Numbering Administration Oversight Working Group's evaluation of the billing and collection agent. Today, you will hear recommendations from the Call Authentication Trust Anchor Working Group on STIR/SHAKEN implementation, specifically best practices for voice service providers regarding call authentication framework. I am certain that the working group's recommendations will be invaluable to us as we continue to work to implement the TRACE Act and move forward in fighting the proliferation of illegal robocalling. On behalf of the Wireline Competition Bureau and the entire FCC, thank you for all of your hard work and dedication to the incredibly complex and technically challenging issues that you deal with in the NANCI. Please continue to stay healthy and safe, and I look forward to seeing each of you in person in the near future. Chair McKee?
Well, thank you very much, Dan. We appreciate you joining us, and we appreciate your kind remarks. Now I will move on to the announcements. We do have a membership update. Christine Hackman will replace Mike Saperstein as U.S. Telecom's primary representative to the NANCI. Many of us know Christine and know what a great asset she will be to the council. So welcome, Christine, and congratulations on your appointment. Next on our agenda, we will hear an update from Brent Struthers, the director of the STIGA. Brent, the call is yours.
Good morning, Chair McKee and Nancy members. Can you all hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
That's a good start. Okay, so let's start with numbers. Everybody wants to get to the numbers first. Registration, we now have 44 active service providers authorized by the CIPA. We have an additional 15 service providers that are approved and through the staging, i.e. the testing phase, which means all they've got to do is finish up their paperwork before becoming active. So we're growing slowly, but doing well. I would remind service providers that might be waiting until the last minute to register with the PA that we expect there to be a large number of providers coming in to register next summer as the FCC implementation deadline nears. So while I can't give you an average time it's taking service providers to pass through the registration process, there's a lot of variation among providers. It's a process that is taking almost all service providers weeks, some months, not days to complete. So we're encouraging service providers not to wait until the last minute to begin the registration process. Certification authorities, a little bit more good news there. The board this week approved another certification authority, Metaswitch. So that gives us a total of 7 certification authorities, 5 of them serving the broader industry. Those 5 are listed on the screen. You see Metaswitch, NetNumber, Newstar, Sansei, and TransNexus. So when service providers register, they will have a choice of certificate authorities to use to get those certificates that they need to sign calls. So we're doing well there. In terms of funding, the board is in the process of finalizing its funding decisions for next year and should be ready to announce the 2021 contribution factor in the 4th quarter. That contribution factor is what the PA uses to determine each service provider's dues, each service provider's annual fees to the PA. One decision the board has made that's related to funding has to do with invoicing. Due to some concerns voiced by a number of service providers in 2020 about confusion over receiving multiple invoices for the STIPA annual fees, the board has determined to bill all service providers for 2021 with only a single invoice. So as opposed to breaking the annual fee in half with payments due in February and July, you'll get one payment either in February or 30 days after you, it'll be due 30 days after you've registered. That's the funding. On policy, the board is reviewing options still to change the token access policy to ensure it is as inclusive as possible without compromising the security ecosystem. We're still working on that. The board recently adopted and posted both of its SBC token revocation and reinstatement policies. You've got the link there. If you go to the resources page, you can find it under the STIGA documents tab. So both of those policies have been posted. They describe in detail the board process to withdraw SBC token access from a provider that may be found to be abusing their SBC token access privileges, as well as the manner in which that provider can seek reinstatement once their access has been revoked. The SBC token is what service provider must have in order to get that digital certificate they use to sign the calls. with the appropriate shake and attestation level. So if you don't have an SBC token, you can't get access to the certificates. You can't sign calls with the SurShaken token. So that's where we are on policy in terms of outreach efforts. The board is soon going to be considering a plan for outreach events focused on educating service providers on how to participate in SurShaken, all the way from STIPA registration to getting the certificate and using it to sign calls. The events will be open to all and free of charge for all attendees. The idea is to for the STIGA and the board to make it as easy as possible for service providers to get involved in SurShaken and register with the STIPA and get their certificate. So we're gonna put as much out there as possible so folks know what they're doing when they get ready to play. And that's my report for today. Any questions?
I do not see any hands raised.
All right.
Okay.
Chair McKee, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brent. We really appreciate your report. So we'll move on to the next item on our agenda. So we'll hear from Teresa Patton, who is co-chair of the North American Portability Management LLC. Teresa, I'll turn the call over to you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. iConnective continues to provide quality support remotely for all NPAC services during the COVID-19 pandemic. We've had one new amendment approved since our last report. That was Amendment 26, which allows for eligible clearinghouse vendors to become users of the eLeap service, and that was approved on August 19th. In regards to NPAC release schedules, Release 4.5 was successfully deployed in the Southeast region on July 26th, and all other regions was deployed on August 9th. For the next release, Release 5.0, since this report, all vendor testing has been completed. And as a reminder, the 5.0 production upgrade will take place on October 25th, and this will be a flash cut across all NPAC regions, and an extended maintenance window has been established for that Sunday. In regards to Contract Implementation Committee, we've had one new PTRS user approved since our last report. There are 54 service providers that have not submitted their annual certification qualification for 2020. The ACQ, or Annual Certification Qualification process for these PTRS users, is being modified for 2021 and beyond, and all PTRS users that were grandfathered under the previous LMPA will be required to complete a new application in 2021. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Teresa. Thank you for the report. Next, we'll hear updates from our Numbering Administration Oversight Working Group, and presenting for the group will be the co-chair, Phil Lindsay. Phil, the call is yours.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair McKee. My name is Philip Lindsay with Lumen. I co-chair this the North American Numbering Administration Oversight Working Group with Bob McCausland and with Entrado Communications and Betty Sanders with Charter. We also have a few FCC liaisons, Bill Anderley, Merva Charles, and Karen Schroeder. To the next slide, please. So the activities since the last update, Nancy meeting update, we continue to do the monthly review of deliverables for the BNC agent, as well as the monthly review of deliverables for the NAMPA and the PA. In addition to that, we've had a couple of items, change orders from the BNC agent, as well as from the NAMPA. And then we also are working towards an L&P oversight subgroup, or a group that would deal with more operational aspects of L&P, such as best practices. Slide, please. So our area of responsibility is oversees the activities and reviews the performance of the North American Numbering Plan Administrator, the NAMPA, as I mentioned earlier, as well as the pooling administrator or the PA, and then the NAMPA billing and collections agent, which is what we refer to as the BNC agent. It also then is charged with providing the oversight of the number portability administration. So as you can see below, we've got the billing and collections, the details associated with that, and descriptions, as well as the NAMPA and then the PA. We move to the next slide, please. So there are essentially 3 contracts associated with our oversight. NAMPA and the PA are separate contracts. We are in a 12-month bridge contract interval that's effective until November 1st or up to November 1st. And then the BNC agent, which is a 5-year contract that was initiated in April of 2018. The next item. So as far as the change orders that were addressed in our meetings since the last Nancy meeting, the BNC R&D change order. This change order allows for the BNC agent Welch to administer the funds that will be collected associated with the reassigned numbers database. This effort will be required to administer the separate funding, and that's separate from the NAMPA and the PA contract funding. The additional fee will be collected from service providers via the upcoming or this month's contribution factor billing. And then once the R&D is established, as user fees are collected, Welch will then refund the service providers those funds through reducing NAMPA fees or by a direct refund. The next item, which is the change order C. So this, and I apologize, this is not exactly the clearest slide. So what the NAMPA change order C does is it sunsets the INC's, the Industry Numbering Committee's 800-855 assignment guidelines, as these numbering resources are no longer necessary to provide services to the deaf and hard of hearing or speech impaired. And this is due to the FCC's implementation of a uniform 10-digit telephone numbering system for internet-based TRS, and that was in 2008. That's FCC 08-151 for reference. This did not, the NAMPA did not identify any risks associated with this. The NAMPA staff will still continue to have access to the historic NAS 800-855 line number information associated with the 93 assignments. There is no intention to request any reclamation of or disconnection of any of those 800-855 line numbers currently in use. And then this was mainly an administrative change, so there's no costs associated with this change order. And then there will be industry notification accommodating the scope of this work and change order. So with that, I think we are to our final slide. Oh, actually, to the number portability. So we are still in the progress of identifying and formalizing the portability working group. This is the working group, or the group that will replace the LMPA working group, and we will have a kind of a dotted line liaison type approach into this group, where we may expect to see work product from this group come through the NAOWG. So we're working on the governance and leadership aspects of that group over the next few months. So with that, we can move to the next slide. So this is our representation with the NAOWG members. And then our last slide, which is the remaining meetings for this year, we will be establishing a calendar for 2021 coming up here in the next couple months. And then if you have any questions after this meeting, feel free to contact myself, Bob McCausland, or Betty Sanders. And with that, if there are no questions, I can hand it back to Chair McKee.
Okay. Do we see any questions, Marilyn?
No, I do not see any hands raised.
Okay. Great. Then thank you, Phil, and all the members of the NAOWG for all of your hard work. Now, next on the agenda, we have a break scheduled, but we're moving pretty briskly through the agenda. So I wanted to check to see, are Jackie and Beth from the CATA working group here and ready to do your presentation at this time?
I am on, Chair McKee. It's Beth.
Hey, Beth. And is Jackie on yet?
Yes, and Beth will be presenting.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, then why don't we move to that? We'll have an overview of the Call Authentication Trust Anchor Working Group's report recommending best practices that providers of voice services may use as part of the implementation of effective call authentication frameworks to accurately identify calling parties. The working group focused on recommendations to facilitate the Commission's implementation of the Pallone-Thune Telephone Robocall Abuse Criminal Enforcement and Deterrence Act, known as the TRACED Act. And presenting for the group are the co-chairs, Jackie Wolgemuth and Beth Chorzay. Co-chairs, the call is yours.
Thank you very much. So this is Beth Chorzay. I'll be presenting today on behalf of Jackie and myself. And I'm pleased to present also on behalf of the whole second CATA working group, our recommendations for best practices in implementing call authentication. And we can go over to the next slide. So a little technical difficulty on my end, but I'm okay here. Okay. So the CATA working group received a charge letter from the Wireline Competition Bureau on February 27th of this year. And the group was asked to recommend best practices to use in implementing call authentication, and more specifically, practices to aid in accurate identification of the calling party, with the official final report due tomorrow. The group was asked to address specific questions in making its recommendations. I'll read through the questions quickly. Which aspects of a subscriber's identity should or must a provider collect to enable it to accurately verify the identity of a caller? 2, what guidelines or standards should providers use when assigning the 3 attestation levels? A, full attestation, B, partial, and C, gateway of the Shake and Stir framework. 3, how should best practices vary depending on the type of subscriber, such as between large enterprises, individuals, and small businesses? When should providers consider using third-party vetting services, and how should they make the best use of them? 5, should there be unique industry-wide best practices for knowing the identity of subscribers located abroad? If so, what best practices could we recommend regarding identification of such subscribers? 6, are there any other best practices voice providers can implement to take steps to ensure the calling party is accurately identified? And I just want to note that in some cases, we define terms used in the questions just to provide clarity for the working group and for the report, because some of the terms could be interpreted multiple ways with respect to scope, but we did include definitions in a glossary in the report. So we can move on to the next slide. Okay. So the best practices roughly correspond with the questions that we were asked to look at, but not precisely. And I'm going to read through the best practices that the group came up with. And in keeping with what I noted in the last slide, the first practice recognizes that not all subscribers who obtain telephone numbers from a provider also use that provider's network to originate calls, and that's part of the reason we wanted to be careful in defining terms. So with respect to subscriber vetting, service providers should vet the identity of retail and wholesale subscribers in conjunction with approving an application for service, provisioning of network connectivity, entering into a contract agreement, or granting the right to use telephone number resources. With respect to TN validation, originating service providers should confirm the end user or customer's right to use a telephone number. And for A-level attestation, originating service providers should authenticate calls with attestation level A only when they can confidently attest that the end user initiating the call is authorized to use the TN-based caller identity associated directly with the calling line or account of the end user. And for B and C level attestation, originating service providers should only authenticate calls with attestation levels B or C for calls where TN validation has not been performed on the originating telephone number. And we can go on to the next slide to continue best practices. With respect to third-party validation services, which were referred to by the FCC as third-party vetting services, originating service providers should use a third-party validation service when they cannot or choose not to independently perform TN validation. Third-party vetting services may be particularly useful in the case of enterprise customers that acquire telephone numbers from multiple telephone number service providers. With respect to international calls, service providers that sell services to international call originators using North American numbering plan numbers should develop processes to validate that the calling party is authorized to use the telephone number or caller identity. Further, domestic gateway providers may wish to explore voluntary commercial arrangements with international providers that include terms and conditions that would give the domestic gateway provider the tools, information, and confidence to trust the validity of the calling entity. And then finally, with respect to ongoing robocall mitigation, service providers, whether IP or non-IP based, should have ongoing robocall mitigation programs in addition to implementing call authentication protocols. The elements of such programs may vary depending on the nature of the service provider's business, but may include ongoing monitoring of subscriber traffic patterns to identify behaviors that are consistent with illegal robocalling. Service providers may, after further investigation, take appropriate action to address such behaviors. So I think you get the idea here that we were trying not to be overly prescriptive in these best practices so that they could apply to a range of different types of business models and businesses. We can move on to the next slide. So
Beth, I have a hand up, Beth, from Chris Drake, iConnected. Chris?
Sure. Hey, thank you, Marilyn. Good morning, Beth. Could we go back to the previous best practice, slide 22, I think, and regarding A-level attestation. I want to seek sort of an elaboration on this sentence here. Can confidently attest to the end user initiating the call is authorized to use the TN-based caller identity associated directly with, I'm going to skip the calling line, that's obvious, directly with the account of the end user. The standards were written to say there would be a verified association between the caller and the number being used, and also the GA guidelines very clearly say you don't have to have the TN associated directly with the account of the end user. And so the words chosen here maybe didn't intend to contradict that, but I feel that they do. So maybe you could elaborate on what was meant by directly with the account of the end user relative to the TN.
So, Chris, I'll invite other members of the working group to comment here. I know we have some others on that may be sort of more technically adept and more familiar with the standards, the in-depth standards. But my understanding is that we would, assert A-level attestation only when we could know both the identity of the user and their right to use the telephone number. And I don't know if you're asking a different question that I may be,
No,
missing.
we're aligned on
intent.
that. I think the wording to say that's only true if you have a direct association with the account of the end user, that is not consistent with the general statement you just made. And it would frankly break the GA policy, and it would break the attestation, the ABCs of shaken as defined in the standards. This account of the end user is not always going to have the TN directly associated with it because they may have got that TN from another provider, just as you said on the prior page. So I'm just seeking like a reconciliation of the statement you could have a TN from another provider and this one that says you must have the TN directly associated with the account of the end user. Those do not feel consistent.
Okay,
Hi,
so
Chris,
I'm going to...
Chris Went.
Go ahead.
This is Chris Went from Comcast. I think the intention here is that there is a association with the calling line or account, whether that's direct, whether the end user account was given the telephone number directly by the provider of that account, or whether there was a validation done to validate the association of that telephone number with the end user that is part of that account. There's two dimensions here. One is the association of knowing that the telephone number is authorized to be used. And then there's also the actual authentication of the calling line or account to make sure that the calls are actually coming from that associated party that owns that account. So I think that's what
I agree with that, Chris. I think that's totally correct. I feel the word directly, used with the account of the end user is too prescriptive and does not fit what we've all been working on as far as a verified association with the user's, with the user, not necessarily its account. That's the entire problem here, right? Yeah. So I think that word maybe a misdirection.
Right. I think if you delete the word directly, maybe that could clear it up. I mean, the association should be there.
Yes, agreed.
I think we meant directly, meaning that it's directly with the actual user of the account, but I understand the confusion. So,
thank you.
Okay. Should we move on to the logistics slide? Okay. So in terms of logistics, the group met 18 times, kicking off on March 13th of 2020. And we had additional subgroups that had additional meetings. And we also had 4 guest presenters. They presented on third-party vetting and international traffic. That was in the case of BT, presented on international traffic solutions, CTIA, Newstar, and Numerical on third-party vetting services. And I think we can move on to the membership slide. And this is our membership. We had participation from 22 different companies, agencies, or associations, all listed here on this slide. And then I think we can go on to the final slide. So in closing, I want to thank the whole entire working group, including our FCC liaisons, CJ Ferraro and Anik Benoon. We had excellent participation from the group with a number of folks making every single meeting. And we had written and oral contributions from a significant number of the team members. Before I noted we had subgroups and guest speakers that were arranged by our team members. And I wanted to give a special thanks to Chris Wendt and Zach Regala from the Montana PSC, who are our technical writers and editor, and for and especially to Jackie Wilchermuth, who just brings incredible organization to the entire process. So I think that is it. Unless Jackie, you have anything to add?
No, I don't. Thank you very much.
Okay, do we have any questions? Okay, not seeing any. Then I will open the meeting for a motion to approve the Call Authentication Trust Anchor Working Group report and recommendations. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve?
This is Bob McCausland. I'll make a motion to approve, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you very much. Would
Madam
anyone
Chair,
like?
excuse me.
Yeah.
I think I see Tim Cagle's hand went up.
Oh,
Tim, did
sorry.
you have a question?
I did. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Chair McKee. So I think before we move with Bob's motion to approve, I think there is an understanding that the approval of the report is done so with the knowledge that we would strike the word directly that we just discussed from the dialogue between Chris Drake and Chris Wendt. Is that a correct understanding?
Well, I guess we would need a clarification if that is in the actual report or if it was just in the presentation materials describing the report.
I believe that is, yeah, I believe that is verbatim from the report.
Then yes, if Tim's understanding is correct, then directly will be stricken from that particular sentence.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Okay, with that clarification, do we have a motion to approve?
With that clarification, this is Bob McCausland. I move that we approve, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Bob. Do we have anyone to second the motion?
Madam Chair, I'd second the motion. This is Bruce Williamson.
Oh, thank you very much, Bruce. Okay, with that second, we will submit it to the full council for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, great. Do we have any nays? Okay, hearing none, the ayes have it, and Nancy approves the report and recommendations with the clarification discussed. Thank you, everyone, very much, and special thanks to the CATA working group members and leadership for all of the very hard work that went into this report. So next, we have a presentation on the second report in order the FCC is working on Stir Shaken. So we welcome Mason Sheffa from the Wireline Competition Bureau, who will update the council regarding that item, promoting caller ID authentication to combat illegal robocalls as the commission works to further implement the TRACED Act. Mason, the call is yours.
Thank you. And hello, everyone. My name is Mason Sheffa, and I am an attorney advisor in the Competition Policy Division of the Wireline Competition Bureau. I will be presenting on the Commission's Call Authentication Trust Anchor draft proposed second report in order, which is on the agenda for the September 30 open meeting. So first, I'll go into some background on this proceeding. Ever since a notice of inquiry was adopted over 3 years ago, the Commission has been promoting caller ID authentication and the Stir Shaken framework as important tools for combating illegal robocalls. In May of 2018, the NANCI issued a report that made recommendations for how the Stir Shaken governance authority should be selected and suggested that capable voice service providers should rapidly implement Stir Shaken. Chairman Pai accepted those recommendations shortly after they were issued by the NANCI. The following summer, in June 2019, the Commission adopted a declaratory ruling and third further notice of proposed rulemaking that, among other things, proposed and sought comment on mandating implementation of STIR/SHAKEN should major voice service providers fail to do so voluntarily by the end of the year. In December 2019, Congress enacted the TRACE Act, which, along with other provisions directed at addressing robocalls, directs the Commission to require no later than June 30, 2021, that all voice service providers implement STIR/SHAKEN in the IP portions of their networks and implement an effective caller ID authentication framework in the non-IP portions of their networks. And on March 30th, 2020, the Commission adopted a report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking, which required all voice service providers to implement STIR/SHAKEN in the IP portions of their networks by June 30, 2021, and proposed additional measures to combat illegal spoofing, including further implementation of the provisions of Section 4 of the TRACE Act related to caller ID authentication. So that brings me now to the draft proposed second report and order. This second report and order would adopt numerous proposals from the March further notice aimed at completing implementation of the TRACE Act's caller ID authentication rules and further promoting caller ID authentication. In terms of TRACE Act implementation, first, the draft order would require voice service providers either to upgrade their non-IP networks to IP and implement STIR/SHAKEN, or work to develop a non-IP authentication solution. Next, the order would provide extensions of the June 30, 2021 implementation deadline for the following categories: small, including small rural voice service providers that are currently incapable of obtaining a certificate necessary to implement STIR/SHAKEN, services scheduled for Section 214 discontinuance, and non-IP networks. This order would direct the Wireline Competition Bureau to reevaluate these extensions annually and to revise or extend them as necessary. Next, this order would require voice service providers subject to an extension to implement a robocall mitigation program on the non-STIR/SHAKEN enabled portions of their networks as required by the TRACE Act. The order overall takes a non-prescriptive approach to the robocall mitigation program requirements in order to provide voice service providers flexibility to adopt programs suited to their network and subscriber base. However, the order would require voice service providers to certify with the Commission that they commit to cooperating with the Commission, law enforcement, and the Industry Traceback Consortium in investigating and stopping any illegal robocallers that they learn are using their service to originate calls, and also certify either that they have implemented STIR/SHAKEN across their entire networks or have implemented a robocall mitigation program on those non-STIR/SHAKEN enabled portions of their network. The order would then establish a database of filed certifications and prohibit intermediate providers and terminating voice service providers from accepting traffic directly from any voice service provider that does not appear in the database. This prohibition on intermediate providers and terminating voice service providers would also apply to foreign voice service providers that use North American numbering plan resources that pertain to the United States to send voice traffic to residential or business subscribers in the United States. Next, the order would allow applicable voice service providers to be exempt from the June 30, 2021 implementation deadline, and it would establish a certification process by which providers that make early progress on caller ID authentication implementation can certify voluntarily that they meet benchmarks sufficient to obtain the exemption. Next, the order would prohibit voice service providers from adding any line item charges to consumer or small business customer subscribers for caller ID authentication technology as required by the TRACE Act. And lastly, taking action beyond the four corners of the TRACE Act, this order would require intermediate providers to implement STIR/SHAKEN in the IP portions of their networks by June 30, 2021. And that's all I have on the second report and order. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to present on this item, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Hey, Marilyn, any hands raised?
No, I do not see any hands raised.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much, Mason. We really appreciate that presentation.
Thanks.
Now we'll move on to the public participation portion of the meeting. As I mentioned in the beginning of the meeting, the public notice was released on August 24th and allowed members of the public to direct comments to the Commission's electronic comment filing system in docket number CC 92-237. So does FCC staff see any comments from members of the public that were filed in that manner in that docket?
There are currently no comments filed in the docket.
Okay, thank you. Then also, as I mentioned earlier, we take questions from the public through the live questions at fcc.gov email address. Have we received any questions via email to read aloud to the group?
We have also not received any questions via email for this meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, then we will bring the meeting to a close. This was a very quick one. Thank everyone for your attendance. I'd like to remind you that our next NANCY meeting will be on December 3rd, 2020 at 9:30 a.m. EST. Bruce, our Vice Chair, do you have anything you want to add before we close the meeting?
No, Madam Chair, I thought this was very helpful. I like the update on the second report in order. I thought it was a very productive meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And Marilyn, do we have any last words from the Commission?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Marilyn. Then if we have nothing else, thank you all very much again for your time. We really appreciate it. Please stay safe, stay well, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.